Hey, how you doing? This is Niall from NoCode.Tech, and we're back again with another no-code interview. Today we've got a really interesting tool. We've got Chris Obdam here from Betty Blocks, and Betty Blocks is interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is by far my most favourite tool in the kind of no-code enterprise or larger company space. And also, Chris and the team have just raised $33 million of funding. So we'll dive into that and we'll kind of get into how that came about and what they're going to do with that. But just to start us off, Chris, first of all, thanks for coming. It'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about what Betty Blocks actually is and what it does.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me, Niall. My name's Chris Obdam. I'm one of the two co-founders together with my brother Tim. Betty Blocks is a no or low-code platform for citizen development. So our main target audience is enterprises. So we help enterprise employees to fix their own software problems. What we see and what everybody probably noticed as well is that there's a growing demand for software within enterprises, and there's also a growing need to be more self-reliant as a business person as well. Everybody recognizes the same situation. You're working somewhere and you want to fix something, so you ask IT, can you help me with that? Can I buy this piece of software, or can I just build it myself or whatever? And most of the time you're not allowed to, or there are no options. So what we bring as Betty Blocks is a standardized platform where everybody inside an enterprise can build their own apps in a safe and secure way to solve your own software problems and to be more happy as an employee, to be more happy as a person. And yeah, that's it, I guess.
Awesome. No, I love that. Exactly. I think in the last 6 or 7 years that I've spent in the enterprise world, the most important thing has always been bridging the business. And it sounds like this is a platform for exactly that. So before we dive into kind of how you guys do that in a bit more detail, would love to hear a bit more about yourself and sort of how Betty Blocks came about. But what's your background, first of all?
I'm a software engineer. So I was one of the guys who was always busy, not helping the business. So where our company started is that, so the first company that I founded 20 years ago, together with my brother again, was getting more and more successful. We were a custom software development agency, and my brother was in charge of operations more in general. So what he wanted to do is to optimize our own processes. And for that, he was looking for standardized tooling, and for some reason, they never fit 100%. It's always 60% maximum, I would say even. So what he wanted to do is make sure that we built our own software tooling, right? So we're a software development company. So why don't we build our own internal software? And with that, we introduced the dependency from him to our own software team, which I was heading. So he needed to wait until resources were freed up before he could fix the problems that he wanted to solve. So he asked me and my colleagues, so why don't you build me something that I can fix more myself? So it started with customizability, and that over time grew into what is now our platform, Betty Blocks. So we really originate from the fact that a business person wants to fix something, that IT folks, me and our colleagues, were too busy doing other stuff, and that business problem was still there. And that is where we come from, and that is how we have always built our platform. That is why we have chosen to position ourselves as no code, because business people are attracted to no code, right? You don't want to do coding because you don't know how to code. So that has always been an important aspect of what we do. Throughout the years nowadays, what you see is that no code is becoming a little bit ambiguous. A lot of standard software are now introducing no-code features. So we are struggling a little bit with that term right now. And also because we do offer a lot of low-code and coding possibilities as well. That is really important because if you're building an app and at 70% of your app, you want to do something, but your no-code platform doesn't have that feature, you don't want to get stuck. So that is one of the more important features and differentiators that we have, is that there's always an escape hatch where if you have experience, you can always use some code to extend our platform and make that available again to no-code developers.
I like that, an escape hatch. So how old is Betty Blocks? Like, how long has Betty Blocks as a company been around?
Yeah, so we officially used 2016. So the product is a little bit older because it started in that prior company, but we use 2016 as our date of foundation.
Yeah. So you guys have come a long way. You've got funding now, etc. But when you kind of, I guess back in 2016, no code was around, for example, and there was lots of other kind of tools there like Bubble and Webflow, but it was still very, very different to how no code is today. Today, everybody knows what no code is. Certainly within our kind of tech sphere. Back then, that was not necessarily the case. What were some of the kind of challenges that you faced at the very start and sort of getting adoption and building Betty Blocks up?
Yeah, and before we officially started in 2016, we were, of course, building our platform as well. And what we noticed when we started building our platform, the term low code wasn't even coined, let alone no code. So I think the most commonly asked question throughout the history of our company is always, can I really build serious applications? Right? So everybody still thinks it's some kind of a to play with toy or something that you can only build prototypes with. That kind of personally annoys me all the time. So that everybody says, "Oh, this is cool to build prototypes." I'm like, "Oh, we build really serious platforms, really serious tools with our platform." So I think that is one thing that we struggled with to really explain the extensiveness of what the platform is. On the other hand, what also is an interesting one is that within enterprises, it is really hard to make sure that business users are allowed to just participate in this, and that you make sure that the entire enterprise landscape cooperates with this as well. So that has always been and will be a continuous struggle, I think, for all of us in this industry, to make sure that it is being approached the right. We work with IT departments on a daily basis. When we joke, we always call IT departments the department of no, and probably for the right reasons as well, because if you allow everything, chaos and mayhem will happen. So you need to be restrictive, but sometimes you need to open up in a controlled way as well. So those are maybe our struggles. And of course, we have plenty of them and we'll continue to have so, because we're a scale up and there's never an easy day in the life of a scale up, as most of you know.
Yeah, and I'd love to dive into that a little bit because it's a problem that I've spent a lot of time on recently. In fact, it's something that you and I have worked together on, is this idea of how do you take in a traditional enterprise where the business is its own thing and IT are there and IT do all the technical work. How do you bring in this kind of bridging concept of no code where suddenly people in the business who okay, they don't have to code, but they also don't understand things like security and scalability and all these kind of things. How have you guys gotten IT departments to be comfortable with that? How can someone actually start to bring no code into an organization and get IT to start saying yes rather than no?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what we offer and how we help is first at platform level. So what we do is we offer a lot of platform features that in a good way restrict people when they're on the platform. So if you're building an app, by default, that is always a private app. So that means that it can't go public. You can't publish information prior to unlocking your application. So there's some kind of control already built in for IT departments that they know that if I open this up, I know that I have end control over applications being published. I think that sounds a little bit restrictive, but it is the restriction that IT departments need to make sure that they have enough control over it. So that is one end, that is something that we explain, and what the listeners and viewers of the podcast can also explain as well. And on the other end, it's also important to make sure to discuss that citizen development is not about just throwing a platform towards the business and then hoping for the best. It is really a strategy that you need to implement. I am an engineer by trade, so talking about implementation strategies normally is not something that I would have expected me to talk about, but it is one of the more important things that we do as a company. So we offer best practices and guide throughout this entire journey. So start small, make sure that you just experiment with it. And if you're talking to an IT department or if you're in an IT department, that is the most safest way to start, right? So start testing a platform with some experienced users first to see how does that platform operate, how secure is it, and then maybe invite some people from the business to participate in there as well. That is what Gartner calls fusion teams as well, just multidisciplinary teams. And that fusion team can start within IT, but you can also start with it in a specific business unit somewhere. You can really feel the water a little bit, see how everybody responds, make sure that you have a controlled way. And those are the best practices that we can offer as well. So on one end, platform features to make sure that control and governance is in place. That's what we as Betty Blocks offer. And on the other end, help the organization with best practices to make sure that you take it step by step.
That's brilliant advice, really, really good. And I think it's that kind of interesting thing around, in the enterprise environment, there's also a huge difference between, okay, you've got one or two teams who are using, and then actually having, what I would call proliferation. That no code is not simply an experiment, running an innovation lab somewhere, but actually it's a discipline or a concept that's wholly embraced by an organization and as much as going to a supplier or bringing an engineering team, our delivery methods, no code is kind of considered one as well. Do you have any examples of an organization that's done this really well, who get lots of different teams building with no code? They've got quite a mature kind of no code, I guess, internal ecosystem or certainly, operating model. Is it still too early days, or do you have kind of customers who are performing like that?
Oh, we have some customers who perform like that. So we have three maturity levels where we rate people on. And this is the actual expansion, the real exploding of citizen development inside organizations. And there are quite some who have achieved that level. It might not be that within an enterprise, everybody is chiming in already, but we're working towards that direction. A nice example that we have is Clifford Chance, which is a big legal firm worldwide, works across all. And what they're currently working on is during their onboarding for new employees, they are making Betty Blocks training part of their onboarding as much as possible. So that means that their main overall goal is to be the #1 legal tech firm in the entire world. And of course, that is something that we can help them with. And yeah, that's the interesting part, is that a lot of companies have goals like that, putting digital transformation first, or every company is an IT company, so we are an IT company as well. The problem with that is that people, they have this vision one, but they don't operationalize it. Because if you do so, that means that you need to have software building capability somewhere. And sometimes they think, okay, if I offshore the entire software development, that fixes that. But everybody who has been in software development, who knows that if you're just doing small improvements, you really need to be part of the business or know the business really well. So that means that you really need to embrace it at a different level, and that you need to make sure that at the end, you create more software development creation capabilities inside your own company. And Clifford Chance is doing that in a really cool way. So we work closely together with them, but there are other ones. So it is still early days, but there are some really positive signs there.
No, that's incredibly exciting. I love the idea of all new employees going through, Betty Blocks training. That's so cool. And I guess you mentioned there, obviously, legal tech. What kind of companies? We've talked obviously about enterprise, which is a very broad brush term. What kind of companies are actually using Betty Blocks, and who's getting the most value out of it? Is it legal companies? Is it finance companies? And specifically, I think a lot of our audience is really used to the concept that you can build a mobile app and put it out there to hundreds of thousands of people. But obviously, Betty Blocks is pretty focused on internal apps. So what kind of things are people actually building, and who are they building them for internally?
Yeah, it's not that people are building only internal apps. So we are quite strong in building customer-facing or partner-facing, external-facing applications as well. Our UI capabilities are best of breed in the market, but a lot of the applications are being built internal, but some of them grow bigger as well. So internal apps, typical companies, it's not that we have some target industries that we work in, like finance, like legal, like other ones as well. But with the characteristic that you see with the company is that there's a high amount of white collar work, and there's a high process intensity. So there are a lot of processes that continuously need to be updated. So if you are this company and there might be, 2,000 people big, but you have been doing your job for the last 100 years and you're not changing and you don't need to change, there's of course less need for new software, less need for citizen development. Truth, of course, is that there's no company like that anymore. Companies who thought that way are now more or less in front of changes right now, because they know they haven't changed for the last 100 years and they really need to change. So that's why legal is quite interesting, because nobody saw legal in the concept of tech 10 years ago. And now legal tech is the more important things that is happening. So and the same goes with more traditional companies where there's less white collar workers, but then it might be field service apps that they are building, because there are a lot of people outside an office and they really can be optimized in terms of processes there as well. So it's really wide at the end, although we have our own target verticals.
That's really interesting. And I guess so out of all the things that you've seen being built with Betty Blocks, is there a particular app or a particular workflow or something that someone's built that you can point to that's a great example of what Betty Blocks can do? Have you got like a personal favourite or a kind of go-to example?
Yeah, there are some fun ones. They might not be very telling towards what you can do with Betty Blocks or as a typical example. But what the fun part is with organical growth within our platform, like we have, is that we found out that somebody built some kind of a Bitcoin mining app. So it was built inside an enterprise, and we're like, I'm not sure what's happening here, but this is really process. So that was a fun one. But at the end application is not the thing that we're most proud of, although we have some really cool customer facing apps who are at the end close to websites even. So my personal favorite is the Dutch soccer club AZ Alkmaar. I'm from Alkmaar as well, and they play in the National League. They play in the Europa League as well, and their entire software is built on Betty Block. So I'm proud of that, and they're doing that with their own internal resources, and that is really rare inside sports organizations to really have that technical skill. And they want to be the most innovative soccer club or football club in Europe, and they're doing quite well. So they're doing a lot at football level, but they're also doing a lot at tech level right now. So I think that is really cool as well. So where we're always most proud of is that we enable people who haven't been working inside software development before. So what we really liked is that there was within a big soda manufacturer, we can't use the name, but it's one that everybody knows. And what happened there is that during COVID, they really needed to create better insight in who is at the office, but also who's being tracked within COVID and stuff like that. So what happened is that their office management knew about the concept of Betty Blocks, and they just started to build an app, which were just office managers, and they are not there. There might be a little bit more tech savvy nowadays, but they just still started building multiple apps around desk reservation, around COVID, test registration, and a lot of different stuff as well. And that's what we've seen happening across the board, is that COVID has really speed up the transition to digital and really created an even bit more and an increasing need for a better software, because people are being more and more reliant on that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I saw a lot of that, and actually, that of course, over a year ago is how you and I first got in touch in relation to sort of building apps for various COVID-related reasons. But I think one of the big change that kind of COVID brought around is, previously when you were looking at a software project as a company, you would take your time, you would consider all the suppliers, consider all the vendors, all the options, all the delivery methods, etc. And that could be a several month long process. Then you finally decide, okay, we're going to build contrast in that. I always remember the sort of madness around a few weeks in March of last year. Certainly when the UK started to go into lockdown, started to shut down, and suddenly it was no longer about how do we build the best software. It was like, how do we build this software? Yes, and that's where no code became a no-brainer. Like I think that was for a lot of people, and certainly from looking at running NoCode.Tech, from looking at our stats and the questions we got, a lot of people just exploded at that point of, okay, how can I make this? And you mentioned a registration system there. That was one of the biggest, things that I saw starting to pop up, is people trying to make like new reception systems or appointment booking systems. One of the questions I kind of do have actually when we're talking around what Betty Blocks can do, etc. So you mentioned that Betty Blocks has best in class UI, and I would agree with that. From the extensive looking at enterprise tools that I've done, one of the things that really impressed me about Betty Blocks was how good the sort of UX and the UI components were. But how does Betty Blocks like differ from the competition, and how do you guys position yourselves? When should someone use Betty Blocks versus not using Betty Blocks?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Al. The question always starts with maybe a counter question, is where do you compare? So if you look at the wider market, we are for enterprises. So a lot of no-code tool, and I think the bulk of no-code tooling right now is meant for startups or for smaller companies. Because if you look at the requirements that enterprises have, that's quite different. So I think that is our big differentiator there. And it also means that we are not here to just build a spreadsheet, right? So if you want to do something, a spreadsheet like use Airtable or whatever, there are plenty tools for that. If you really want to build an app which really needs to look and feel like an app, because you're using this in the long term, or you are using it customer facing or public facing somewhere, that is really important as well. and also around integrations as well. So we have a lot of built-in integrations with enterprise systems like SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, and stuff like that. You can really do that at a business level. So you don't need to bother about how to do the technical stuff. The only thing you need to do is connect with SAP, and then you can use it inside your BettyBlocks app. So that is where we differentiate in as well, to really have extensive and low-level integration possibilities, and also counts with the extensibility of our platform as well. So with a lot of no-code tools, it is just as is. There might be some plugins here and there, and you might even extend that a little bit. But with BettyBlocks, you can extend every level of our platform. So you can build your own integration at code level if you like to. You can build your own component set if you like to. You can import different component sets. So we rely on the Material UI component set, but you can also make use of the Windows and the Microsoft component set and all the ones, and there are dozens of them out there, and you can just import them in your application and then start using it. And that is because enterprises, of course, want to make sure that if people are building an app, you want to make sure that the branding of all those applications is in line. So our theming and component system is really built to make sure that all applications according to the right branding. You don't need to, and you can enforce that as well. So that is another differentiator that we have, is that we have a lot of control and governance features at higher level, which makes sure that if there are 100 developers on BettyBlocks within your organization, you can make sure that it's A, secure, and B, controlled, but C, that the actual outcome, the quality is on par as well. And I think that is really important difference.
And one of the things, that I've said before about BettyBlocks is, to me, what I like about BettyBlocks, if you put all the features, etc. aside, is that fundamentally it feels like a proper no-code tool. And especially for those listening who are not kind of aware of this, but in the consumer side of no-code, we have a very clear definition, in my mind anyway, of no-code versus low-code, and also zero-code. So if you're using a platform like Airtable that's not really programming, it's more of a spreadsheet, that's what we kind of call zero-code. You don't really have to understand programming logic in the slightest. Then you've got something like Bubble that we would call no-code, and it's kind of what I would also call the consumer counterpart to BettyBlocks. You kind of have to understand programming logic to some extent. It's a lot more complex than using something like Airtable, but of course the outcomes are a lot more complex as well. But again, you don't have to know how to code. You simply have a bit of a learning curve. And then of course you come into what we would call low-code platforms, and there can be all different examples of these, but the big differentiator between no-code and low-code to me is, of course, no-code is about non-technical people being able to build without coding. Low-code, on the other hand, is about technical people being able to build things faster, quicker, easier, etc. And so for me in the consumer space, there's a huge difference there. No-code is stuff like Bubble, low-code is stuff like 8base, Superbase, etc., Firebase even. But then when you look in the enterprise side, and as you know, Chris, I've spent a lot of time, as much as you have, speaking to IT departments and architecture departments and all these kind of places about, adopting no code and low code. And generally the enterprise industry just mixes these two concepts together. It's like, oh, that platform's no code, low code. And to me, that always seems a little bit odd, a little bit weird, because if it's low code, it should be for IT to use. If it's no code, it should be for the business to use. Of course, those can cross, but it's very hard. It's very easy, I suppose, to get IT to adopt no code. It's much harder to get the business to adopt low code. And so where I'm kind of going with that is, as I say, the thing that I really like about BettyBlocks that I think differentiates it from other tools that people would put in the same box as you guys, like Mendix and OutSystems and Zudi and all these tools, is you guys are truly no code in my mind. Yes, you can add things and add low code elements, but a non-technical person can take it and use it. So are you finding that as a differentiator when it comes to sales? Are you finding you're being pushed more towards the low code end of the market or pushed more to no code? How is that starting to evolve?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're still a little bit caught in the middle, and we like it there as well. So if you would ask us which persona do we optimize our platform and propositions for, it's always the business user needs to come first. But if you want to enable a business user successfully building an app inside an enterprise, you need to offer those low-code features as well. So that is why we are now positioned as no-code, and we call it no-code with low-code capabilities, which kind of makes it a little bit more harder to get, perhaps, but really explains what we're doing. Because otherwise you're stuck on a no-code platform and this business user is building, but when you're stuck, that IT person is not willing to help you because it doesn't bring you any features to help you in a real way. So if you ask us, the business user always comes first, but that business user is not able to be 100% successful if the IT can't really help on the delivery there as well. And that's why you need those low code features as well.
Brilliant. And so we talked a bit there about kind of where's Betty Blocks going, which seems like a good time to kind of segue into some chat about funding. So it's been a pretty exciting kind of last month or so. I think, you guys announced a $33 million funding round, which is huge. We've got lots of other no-code tools getting funded. Leapwork, I think, got 55 million or something like that. Stacker got 20 million. Bubble got 100 million, which is an insanely huge round. And I even noticed today there was a no-code tool I hadn't even heard of before called Anima that's also raised 10 million. And these are all of them are all gigantic figures, So incredibly exciting to see the no-code space getting funded. But I'd love to know a little bit more about Betty Blocks' journey through funding. So probably the first question I've got is this your first funding round, and how did it come about?
Okay, good question. So we are a bootstrap company to start with. So I started entrepreneuring 20 years ago. And over time, we started building Betty Blocks and starting to attract the first clients with that. So we have always been a bootstrapped company. Over the years, we have attracted an informal investor as well. Over time, a couple of years ago, who helped us to grow some stages further. And we also had help from the NIBC Bank as well, which really helped us to grow further as well. So we have somewhat of an atypical funding history. We didn't start with seed capital somewhere where you have a venture capital firm or whatever. So we kind of grew organically, which really helped our company culture to establish as well and to create somewhat of a unique identity for the company. And always to put customers first and employees first as well. So we're very happy with that. But what we also knew is that this is a hot market right now. So the timing is now, not in 2 years from now. So we really want to make sure that we have enough budget and we have enough funding to make sure that we compete with the competitors that we directly go head to, and that is not Bubble, and that is not the other names that you mentioned, but those are more in the enterprise space. So and that's where we are using the funding for as well. We are a product company, so when it comes to funding, our top priority is always building an even better product and making sure that we have even better enterprise level features. So that is where we're using the money for. And besides that, we're of course growing our overall organization and making sure that we can grow in the regions that we're active in. Maybe a short moment about competition as well. So OutSystems was mentioned. They are definitely not in the citizen development space. They are for pro developers. On the other hand, you have Bubble, which is more scale-up, startup, SME oriented, and Airtable is not of our competitors. We all like the other platforms. We of course look at them. They probably look at us as well. But we don't see them in any sales cycle that we're in. So our big competitor at this stage is most of the time Power Apps, is widely available as well. There are quite a lot of quirks in that platform, pricey, really costly as well to use. And there are a lot of downsides to that. So that is where we are heading head to head with most of the time. And that is also why we raised, because if you're competing with Microsoft, it always helps to have an extra euro, dollar, or pound in your back pocket when you're competing.
Yeah, 100%. It's not a position that I envy at all, competing with any of the kind of tech giants, of course. And I suppose all of them do have their own offering, right? I mean, Google's kind of got Uncork in a sense with an investment. Amazon have got Honeycode, etc. But Power Apps is probably the only tech giant, no-code platform that I've seen that has any relevance at the minute. I think the other two, to my mind, are still quite far off. But it's interesting, that you guys started as a bootstrapped company, and especially I'm a bootstrapped founder myself. It's my second time kind of going down the bootstrap route, and there is always that kind of niggling thought in your head of, should I try and raise money? Is it the right time? Am I better bootstrapping, etc., and kind of continuing on, especially when you see a lot of money sloshing through the sector, as we've just discussed with your raise and everyone else's raise. You can start to think, well, is now the time before competition heats up, etc. But the question I've got for yourself is, sort of, what's that transition been like of going from bootstrapped and sort of fully on your own to going to investment? Was it a hard decision? Did it come to the point where it was like, this is a no-brainer? How's it kind of felt and how's it changed things?
So the current setup is a little bit different maybe than a year ago, but yeah, so we push ourselves to the limit and we really want to grow and grow fast. So that means that you really want to have a cadence in terms of reporting, continuous improvement in the company, in the product and everything. So the only thing what an investor brings is that you need to report on that on a monthly basis. on a quarterly basis. And that's what we're doing already. And if they're pushing on pain points inside our organization, which we always have, then those are not pain points that are unknown to us. So for me, it is not really that big of an impact. We like to be pushed, we like to be challenged. So that really helps. And of course, we're still in the honeymoon of things. So you always need to see if the real shit hits the fan, how the dynamics are going to be. But I'm pretty confident that we'll manage that as well. So I just like that the stakes are a little bit higher. I just like it personally. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, so I know how much stress comes with the job. And so, yeah, I've grown a little bit bold over the years, so that's probably stress related as well. So I like it.
Brilliant. Good, really refreshing to hear. And so I guess you're giving us your thoughts then on where Betty Blocks is going and what you're going to use the funding for there. What's your kind of, not so much your vision, but what's your kind of predictions or how do you see the future of the no-code movement as a whole? What do you think is going to be the next big things and where do you think it's going?
I think in terms of enterprise citizen development, I expect a lot about making it part of as mentioned with Clifford Chance, making it part of standard onboarding and a standard tool set. There are still some big steps that we need to take there. There are still some controls, some governance issues, some overall cultural stuff, but I really expect a lot from that. It really makes sense that right now, if you're working inside a company or you're starting your startup somewhere, and if you don't know how to operate Excel, that it's not okay, right? So when Excel started, in the first initial days, I always compared with that. You really needed to be some kind of a genius to really understand the whole concept behind it. And I see the same thing with process improvement and no code in general. So in 5 years from now, if you're working somewhere as a professional, regardless where you are, and you can't build a simple app to fix your process or maybe to optimize your work, you're probably not a very, let's say, a modern day professional. And so that is where we expect the most from, is that it becomes a part of everyday life. And you already see that happening as well. So we expect that will explode in the next 5 years. And we are planning to be a leading player in that field.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The way I see no code and certainly what we're trying to do here at NoCode.Tech, where education is ultimately it's a new skill, it's a soft skill that sits in between, I know how to use Microsoft Office on the one hand, and then I know how to program on the other side of the spectrum. There's always been this divide, which is, I guess, the business and IT of the people who can manipulate the digital world and the people who can. And I think no code is a mass adoption skill for allowing anybody to manipulate the digital fabric. And I think I completely agree that that's going to explode in the next few years. What happened to no code in kind of 2018, 2019 when it really kind of took off and gained a lot of early adoption? I think the enterprise side of the world, and as a result, the mass adoption side of the world, still has that to come. I think we're not crested over that wave yet, so it's mega exciting. And actually, it gives me another question for you, which is to anyone who's either listening to this or who's considering implementing no-code tools and practice in their business, but maybe they're a little bit hesitant or a little bit. What would your advice to them be? How do they get started?
Yeah, it's just as simple as just signing up, right? So if you just, it always helps with stuff to just get started, and I don't make it too big. So if you're new to no code in general or to citizen development, just go to bettyblocks.com, click on free trial, and then start building. That is the easiest way to get started as well. If you need a little bit of help, just reach out as well. Just submit a form or just send a message to me via LinkedIn or whatever, or just via email, chris@bettyblocks.com. Feel free to drop any email, any request. We're here to help as well. So, but what I've learned is that it all has the same with physics and with chemistry as well. If you have atoms and they're not moving and electrons, they're not moving, it really takes a lot of energy to get them moving again. So you need to make sure that you keep on moving, because then you can adapt to changes faster. So just make sure that you keep on moving and keep on changing, then everybody will be fine.
I like that. And so the last question I've got for you, and something we ask every interview in this series, I guess, stepping away from specifically no code for a second. As you said, you've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, and a lot of our audience are in large companies and enterprises, and are looking to get started with tools like BettyBlocks, etc. A lot of them are also looking to begin an entrepreneurial journey, or they've just begun an entrepreneurial journey. So what are kind of 2 or 3 things that you wish you'd known at the start? What's some of the advice you might pass on to the new entrepreneurs of today?
I always start with a counter question is how big do you want to be at the end? So how big is your ambition? If your ambition is to change the world and to become the next Jeff Bezos, and a lot of people have that ambition, which is cool. I really think big. What I see happening as well is that if you really want to end at, I don't know, step Z, Y, or Z in 5 years, make sure you have a good plan the next 5 years. So per year, a good step, and then the first year, initial year, make sure you have the quarterly goals as well, and that you really challenge yourself and check if you're meeting your goals. Because if there's one thing that happens quite a lot is that they're very good in deceiving themselves. Because you think you're doing quite good, but are you still on track for the same goal? And it might be that you need to maybe change your overall goal a little bit because there's only one Jeff Bezos, and that is fine. Let's keep it that way. So please just make sure that you have your own personal goal there, but make sure that you track your own progress. And if you're not doing so for 2 quarters in a row, you need to radically change something somewhere. And it's okay to fail as well. So if you're not doing so, it might be better just to quit and start something else. Maybe another tip, I follow the NoCode Twitter community as well. And I've been reading a lot of tweets about starting 12 startups at the same, invest in a lot of small bets. And I understand, so from a calculations point of view, it might make sense, right? Because you're spreading your bets. But if you do that, this first moment of success you see somewhere, quit everything else and focus, because focus is 90% of your success. So the more distraction you have, the less successful you're going to be. So that might be a nice one for the no-code community at this stage. And I understand it's really tempting to build, I don't know, this other product because you can build it so easy. And then you have 5 products to maintain. I have not seen that many people who have made more than 1 product successful, let alone 12.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's the flip side or the dark side of friction-free software building. So amazing advice, Chris. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast, the show, whatever you want to call it. As you mentioned earlier, for the audience listening, if you want to try BetaBlocks, then jump onto betablocks.com. Sounds like there is a free trial on there, and as Chris mentioned, you can reach him anytime, chris@betablocks.com over email. So Chris, thanks very much for coming on. Really appreciated it, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Niall, and thank you for having me. And maybe on a final note, so if you need a little bit more help other than just signing up, you'd like to have a training, there are free trainings available as well for people who are listening to this podcast. So send the same email and I can make sure that you get a lengthy training for free to make sure that you get started on our platform.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris. I'm sure a few people will enjoy that. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you, Niall.